What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Corner. I hope you're having a wonderful day. If you are, make sure you leave a like on that video and hit that red subscribe button down below so you get notified when I actually upload. YouTube likes to bury all that stuff. Now, I had a feeling this was coming. A quiet cry to replace Galadriel, or at least an admission by the media at this point that the character is unlikable and perhaps the story should not have centered around her. What's crazy is Galadriel is totally likable as a character, well beloved by Tolkien fans from top to bottom. It's just the way that they've written her is unlikable. I think they can salvage it in season 2 with whatever viewership they have left. Season 1 is probably already filmed. I'm not sure there's much they could do about that, but they've got to fix the Karening, the stomping around like a petulant child stuff that people just don't like. Galadriel doesn't need to do that. She should command a lot more respect. But here's this article. Sarah Richards writes, why Galadriel comes off as unlikable in the Rings of Power. Galadriel in the Rings of Power was quite different from her counterpart in The Lord of the Rings. In Amazon's long-awaited series for Rings of Power, Galadriel's character was portrayed as an abrasive and arrogant warrior princess. The Galadriel of Lord of the Rings was kind, warm, gentle, with beauty and charisma. It's difficult to imagine her as a wrathful soldier clad in a suit of armor. But that's the modern day writing though, right? You know, and I know, that the writers at Amazon, who I'm sure are all fired by now, is that they were like, well, that's just how they write women. Regal and feminine. We need to have her shoulder to shoulder with men 100 pounds heavier than her, BTFOing 5 Numenorian guards with the greatest of ease, because women bosses can do everything, right? Yeah! All right, who ordered the oversized cupcakes? Her elegance and stature did not mesh with the unpleasant she-elf in Rings of Power. This disparity could be explained by thousands of years that separated young Galadriel from older Galadriel, but they never even bothered. In the Rings of Power, the story follows events that took place in the Second Age of Middle-earth. Though in the prologue, Galadriel can be seen placing an elven helmet upon a massive pile of helmets belonging to elves slain in the War of Wrath, which ended in the First Age. Her experiences surrounding that war made it difficult for her to believe evil was not gone. She tells Gil-galad that evil does not sleep, it waits. In the Rings of Power, Galadriel's conviction comes across as arrogance and anger. In Lord of the Rings, Galadriel was not shown as a warrior, which makes the comparison with the character depicted in the Rings of Power jarring and difficult to reconcile. There's considerable contention around the idea that she was a warrior with many battles under her belt. While Tolkien made no specific mentions in the Silmarillion of Galadriel fighting in battle, Tolkien wrote in the Unfinished Tales, she was proud, strong, self-willed, and she fought fiercely against Fëanor in defense of her mother's kin. He strongly insinuated that she was a warrior in her youth. Galadriel in the Rings of Power is a deceptive, albeit possibly embellished, of a younger fighter fueled by anger. The Rings of Power show Galadriel as bitter and impatient. She was driven by desire for revenge. Her father and 3 of her brothers have been lost to Morgoth. Galadriel was very close to her brother Finrod. She could be seen in an episode of the Rings of Power, and when he was mortally wounded by a wolf of Sauron, Galadriel swore vengeance. She, like her Lord of the Rings parallel, had a deep sense of right and wrong, of light and dark. As shown in the Rings of Power, she traveled to the ends of Middle-earth to seek out Sauron. Her consuming anger was born of loss and suffering. Depending on the calculation, Galadriel was anywhere from 1200 to 2200 years old at the time of the Rings of Power. And Lord of the Rings, she was roughly 7,000 years old. This was a substantial age differential. Yeah, 5,000 years? To illustrate the point, in human years, we'd be comparing an 8-year-old levels of experience to the knowledge of that of a 40-year-old. The young Galadriel was still maturing, still learning. Her brash belligerence was a function of deep loss and monumental grief. The Rings of Power show Galadriel as she was on her journey towards a powerful, serene Galadriel with whom viewers are most familiar, except they haven't really shown that. She's just been a brat, like, the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, she just takes it. She just takes what she wants, and there's no consequence for any of it. Morfydd Clark, the actor who portrayed Galadriel in Rings of Power, said of her character, quote, "Humility is going to be a big part of her character arc. The off-putting and unlikable nature of Galadriel that was much loved part of Lord of the Rings was merely a matter of age. Tolkien himself wrote that she changed and grew, and that she was what the Rings of Power depict in Galadriel." I mean, this sounds like excuse making for bad writing. I mean, I would think that you would want to at least have, I don't know, some level of, you could be telling us in some way, shape, or form that growth is coming, right? In some way, shape, or form. And then you see Eric Kane writes this: maybe Galadriel shouldn't have been the central hero. One thing that I've thought about quite a lot is the notion that maybe Galadriel simply shouldn't have been the central character in the show. She's one of the only elves that have lived long enough to have come from Valinor. In the films, Peter Jackson used lighting trickery to make Cate Blanchett's eyes shimmer and glow because she's seen the two trees of Valinor, and the light still infuses her being, including her hair. Indeed, Fëanor was so bedazzled with Galadriel's hair that he came up with the idea to imprison the light in the trees into his gems. The Silmarils, which were so bewitching to Melkor/Morgoth, that he stole them. Also noteworthy, with this in mind, is how precious a gift of Galadriel's hair truly is when she gives 3 strands to Gimli in the Fellowship of the Ring. I mean, in any case, the problem here is that Galadriel does not have shimmering eyes, and her hair does not glow with the light of 2 trees of Valinor. She just comes across as young and very serious, and a very angry woman who ignores advice and who has little wisdom. All of which is both odd and frustrating. I don't think she'd be a very likable character even if she wasn't Galadriel, and some young non-canon elf made up for the story either. But at least that would make sense. The best part of Rings of Power are Elrond and Durin, and the non-canon. He continues writing, Galadriel is an important side character that would have worked much better than Galadriel as the central protagonist. She could still be deeply concerned about the threat of Sauron's return. Like Churchill, she could urge her fellow elven elders and leaders to prepare for the worst. She could even send out the non-character character. We'll call her Sessindriel, which is a female name meaning searcher, to find clues about the enemy's whereabouts. Much of the same basic premise could apply with the new character, but a much younger and more inexperienced elven warrior without all the lore baggage Galadriel comes with. That's the thing, right? Like, the idea that, oh, she's young? She's still, at minimum, 1,200 years old? I wouldn't exactly call her young. I would think that you'd probably be pretty wise, to see by that age, right? If you've lived 10 lifetimes, actually, by that standard, that's almost 20 lifetimes, because people probably live 40 years during this time, right? 40, 50 years. It says, and like you see, I'm much less concerned with Elrond for 2 reasons. First, I think his story with Durin is, as I mentioned above, one of the better parts of the Rings of Power. Second, he is younger than she is. Elrond was born in the First Age, year 532, which makes him a few thousand years old, but he was born during the years of the sun, about 1,800 solar years after Galadriel was born. She was born during the year of trees in the year 1362. The next 138 years into the true... Okay, we're getting into... Eric Kane knows his Tolkien, okay? In any case, having Galadriel as a younger, more fiery character would still certainly make sense, but rather than have her out on adventure, she would already be a great lady, wed to Celeborn, and ruling over her own people. She would still have an important role in this series, but they don't want that. They wanted her to be the girl boss. I think we all know. I mean, Eric's really coming at this from, I think, a good... position as a deep Tolkien fan, but like, I think as somebody who consumes a lot of Hollywood dreck, It's pretty obvious that they wanted her to be a girl boss and they just didn't care how she got there. They're like, oh, look, we have this lump of clay that's already super strong and powerful. We don't need to worry about whether anybody, if you don't like her, well, then of course you're just sexist. You see, like, this is a long-winded way of saying I wish that the series had just made up most of its characters like it's done with Arendir and Nori and so forth. Meanwhile, Morfydd Clark could get a chance to play a more regal but still passionate rather than serene and retired version of Galadriel. Several thousand years younger, but still older than pretty much any other character in the show, save Sauron. This would help fix a lot of the problems with Galadriel, and which there are currently far too many. Alternatively, Morfydd Clark could play Sisindriel, and they could have tried to nab Cate Blanchett to reprise her role as Galadriel, which would have been easier, and she's had more of a side character rather than a main character to be in every single episode for 5 seasons. Something a star like Blanchett might blanch at doing. She doesn't want to star in every episode is what they're saying, but she would have probably, been down to cameo. Comments say perhaps the show's creators should have started smaller, picked 1 or 2 of these stories and planted them. Couldn't agree more. The show is trying to weave too many threads at once. 4 episodes, and the writers still seem ineffectively rushing about the table setting for the one big main epic course, without giving any heed to the needs of their guests in the meantime. Would you think sidelining Galadriel would fix the show? I guess save a major humbling. Unless there's like a major humbling coming and she completely about faces her attitude and behavior, I don't know what you do with her because she's unlikable and you've clearly forced her through as the main protagonist in the series. 5 seasons of this woman is going to be insufferable. No one's going to make it. They have to make a major change to the way that she exists, and they can't do anything until season 2, which means we have to ride it out for 4 more episodes this year. It's going to be bad. Will there be anybody left in season 2 if they want to fix it? I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to reading all your comments in the comment section down below. If you can, please do click that red subscribe button down below the video. I would really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again real soon.